Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. We're presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we have a good friend of the program, Cole Zwicker. Recording just about 25 minutes after we recorded this last podcast that we did that was released on Sunday night. We just decided to break that one out into its own podcast because it was LeBron James, and LeBron deserves his own podcast. But we're going to talk about every other deal that has been consummated up until about 10:30 East Coast time on Sunday night, July 1st. There have been like 20 other deals, so it's going to give us more than enough to talk about. Cole, how are you doing? It's been a long time, clearly.
Seriously, man, I'm still trying to process this Lance Stephenson deal. I have nothing to say, but I have all of the feels. It's just the weirdest deal I've seen thus far out of everything we've seen.
Well, it's not even like, well, yeah, it's weird because of like the LeBron Lance factor, but I don't even really care about that. I care about the fact that the Lakers just used their room exception on someone who is like not good at basketball. Lance Stephenson is a player who in his career has posted a true shooting percentage above league average like once. And over the last 2 years has a true shooting percentage of 48.9%. I just don't care about that. Like that's atrocious to me. Why would you want to spend legitimate dollars on someone who is going to turn the ball over, who's going to make poor decisions, and who can't do anything efficiently? It doesn't really make sense.
And the Lakers were 29th in the regular season last year in three-point shooting at 34.5%. Lance Stephenson, I believe, was under 30% from three last year. Yes, he was 28.9%. So that's the one area they really needed to improve upon. I do not get this at all.
No. Does not make any sense at all. Let's talk about the important deals, though. Do you want to start with Paul George? Or do you want to start with Chris Paul? Where do you think is the smartest place to go?
Let's do Paul George. I just feel like, again, that kind of lines up with the conversation we had about LeBron and choosing the 3+1 length. Just what a huge win for Vecenie, man.
Yeah, so I was surprised that this was a 3+1 contract. I did not think that he would want to go for 3 years because it made a lot of sense for him to keep his options open long term, and it also made sense for him to get back onto the market after he was a 10-year veteran, so he would be eligible for 35% of the salary cap on what is currently projected to be a $116 million cap as opposed to a $101 million cap, or $100 million salary cap. So it just doesn't really make all that much sense to me for him to do a 3+1. Now, Adrian Wojnarowski reported that, the idea here is, and you can see this just because if you know cap dynamics, you can see where this is going. That he would potentially sign like an additional 3-year extension that would be worth 49, something like that. Sure, you could do that, but A, I don't know if I'm Oklahoma City, if that's a road I want to go down, and B, it doesn't, you're still getting the 2 cheap years after, you sign this extension. Like before the extension actually kicks in, you're still stuck making, what is the number? It is, sorry, I have it pulled up. You're still stuck making $35 and $37 million as opposed to 40 and 44 or whatever.
Yeah, I think that this goes to the overarching point. A lot of people were lashing out at Paul George because the money wasn't right as far as optimizing that, and it's not the best situation, I guess, to win if LeBron's going to LA. I just think this kind of comes into stark display that players do things for different reasons than what fans think they should do them, right? I mean, he obviously liked the organization. He felt comfortable there. He likes playing with Russell Westbrook. And these are things that nobody really expected him to think, just because the narrative on Russell is so poor as far as him being kind of that ball-dominant initiator. But Oklahoma City's culture, I guess, won out. So, I mean, if you look at this from did he optimize his market share? No. But I guess he optimized what he wanted, and he gave a little bit back to the franchise.
Yeah, and there's also the idea of getting security and mitigating your risk as well. Given that over the course of his career, Paul George has suffered what many people thought at the time could be like a career-ending injury. I understand the idea of security, but for me, it just isn't. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense whenever you're talking about someone that's going to be up at like $150 million already by the time his career is over. And if you're trying to, I guess that once you've made that kind of money, though, it doesn't really matter, right?
For sure. And I think that the sentiment's spot on as far as it being a little bit confusing as far as structure. That's why it was probably one of the most surprising deals that we've seen, just from the contract length and it not really falling into what we thought would maximize both his earning potential and his ability to win games, even though I do think that the Thunder organization and their team is probably a little underrated. Andre Robertson was he was incredibly important to that roster. Getting Jeremy Grant back is going to help. They just need to find a way to get out of luxury tax hell in a way that doesn't cost them too much.
So, yeah, this is something I wrote about at The Athletic. Please go support my work at The Athletic and keep me employed. That would be nice. Having said that, what I wrote about was the fact that this team was a lot better than it got credit for whenever people just saw them. They got eliminated in the first round of the Western Conference playoffs by Utah. I mean, they lost Andre Robertson, like you mentioned, and when Andre Robertson was on the floor, they were a 99, .2 defensive rating, which would have been first in the NBA by something absurd like, I think it would have been like 4 or 5 points per 100 possessions. Without him, they had a defensive rating of like 110, which would have been, I think, 20th in the league. So he's going to make a significant impact coming back. Jeremy Grant's going to make a significant impact coming back because he is a really, really good defender that we'll talk about momentarily. And, just being around and having this chemistry for year 2 is going to be valuable, I think, too.
Absolutely. And let's just call a spade here, as much as it sucks to say, is Carmelo was an absolute disaster in that Utah series. He could have been the biggest reason why Oklahoma City lost that. And I think if you add in what you noted about the defense, having 2 high-level defensive players, well, maybe like 4 high-level defensive players, honestly, around Russell Westbrook. Like, if you put in Jeremy Grant at the 4, Robertson at the 3, you're going to suffer shooting the ball. I mean, it's going to put a lot of pressure on Westbrook and Paul George to kind of create, but at least they have an avenue to guard these high-level teams. And Melo was, again, if he has to take either a supporting cast role, they have to find a way to move him or, stretch him and save, over $100 million. I know that they want to kind of try to save face and not damage their reputation because the Thunder care a lot about how they're perceived in the league, but I would expect some kind of movement on that front. Yeah,
and the easiest way is Kyle Singler, right? You can shave $20 million off of your luxury tax just by stretching Kyle Singler. And because he has that non-guaranteed money on the second year, you can do it over 5 years for under $1 million a year. That seems like something that will happen, right?
It's definitely going to be entertained. I'm very curious to see how they proceed and how the market overall reacts to all of these teams that need to shed luxury tax money, like Denver, Oklahoma City. Those two stand out more than anything.
Milwaukee.
Teams like Atlanta. Yeah, Milwaukee too. But teams like Atlanta, those guys, maybe the Kings, are going to wait around to see kind of how they're going to utilize their cap space. If there's a big market, if there's a lot of teams with a lot of cap space, that's going to help these teams that are trying to avoid contracts like Oklahoma City, because those teams aren't going to have the same caliber of leverage. If it ends up being like 2 or 3 teams that have cap space, that's going to make it really, really interesting because those teams can then demand more.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And Oklahoma City, like you mentioned, the idea of stretching Melo, right?
Yeah.
Like that saves them, I think the number right now is like $88 million. Based off of what they have right now, if they would stretch Melo, it would save them $88 million this year. That seems like something they should entertain. And, the other part of this is that it would probably make more sense to trade Carmelo Anthony, break up his deal into smaller bits. Like if you could do a deal with Milwaukee for, Matthew Dellavedova and John Henson, although Milwaukee is in their own issues right now in terms of just having the hard cap potentially thrown up against them. If you could do something like Danilo Gallinari to the or to Oklahoma City, they take on an extra year of salary cap and lose $30 million of luxury tax savings. Carmelo Anthony can just deny the trade. He has a no trade clause. That's what makes all of this so frustrating. He can just decide, no, we're not doing that. My team and I are not doing that. Like, I think that this is going to end with him getting stretched. I really do.
And that was the point I was going to make, too, is the no trade. Like, you have to not only find a destination for him, but one he agrees to. And that seems like it's going to be pretty difficult to align salary and get a team to take that on, especially because I believe the Thunder, they owe their 2020 first-round pick to Orlando. So they can't trade a first-rounder until 2022 conditionally via the Seppian rule, because that would violate if they traded it in 2019 or 2021. So that even further complicates a trade because they don't have an immediately available first-round pick.
Yeah. In terms of the Thunder here going forward, let's talk about Jeremy Grant as well. I was a big fan of this deal. 3 years, $27 million. He is very young. I think he is 24 years old. He's going to be entering his prime. He is just overall a very useful player. I thought he was one of the better bench players in the entire NBA this year because he fits exactly what Oklahoma City wants to do defensively, because he's very switchable. He's a good weak side rim protector. He averaged like 15 and 8, I think, per 36 minutes while shooting a 60.7 true shooting percentage. So there's a lot of really valuable, kind of ways for them to go about this.
Yeah, he can play some backup five. I think that's honestly maybe his best position overall. He's going to play a lot of four. The Thunder like to keep positional size on the floor, but they don't have a lot of depth on that team. Like, Patrick Patterson didn't give them what they expected. Kyle Singler, Dakari Johnson, as far as interior play and front court play. So he was really, really huge signing for them, man. I know it, again, it puts their luxury tax bill at a ridiculous all-time level, but they really needed him. If they're going to go all in and really pay the luxury tax, you got to make sure that you at least have enough depth to where you can really compete. And he was imperative for that. Yeah.
Let's move on. Let's get off of Oklahoma City here, although I guess they were one of the most important teams on the first night of NBA free agency, and they deserve the time that they got at the top here. Denver, maybe let's talk about now, because Denver is also in a weird situation, as I believe you mentioned on the last podcast and on this podcast too. Denver is in a spot where they have now officially maxed Nikola Jokic to a 5-year, $147.7 million deal, if I remember correctly. They also signed Will Barton to a 4-year, $53 million deal. Is that the right number?
I think it was 54, but really close to that.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting contract there as well. I think that's a deal that they basically had to get done. It's a little bit more than what I would like to pay for Will Barton, but it's not enough of an overpay to where I'm going to kill them for it. They're going to be really good. They're going to be better than they were last year, but this is now a very weird situation where, because of the strength of the Western Conference, they might be paying the luxury tax for a team that doesn't make the playoffs.
Yeah, and they are not just paying the luxury tax. They are $22.5 million right now over the luxury tax. And we're assuming that they're going to get off some of their contracts. We've heard Houston is interested in a guy like Wilson Chandler. He might have some value around the league that doesn't require them to attach an asset. But they're paying – how many guys are they paying that are making over $12 million this year? 7 or 8? It's unreal.
Like that.
It's pretty crazy when you go down the list, and but I don't know how much I love the Will Barton contract. I don't think it's a crazy overpay. Starts with 8% escalators at a little bit over $12 million. It just kind of makes deals like we talked about Lou Williams way back on the podcast, and him getting like 3 years, 24. I mean, would you rather have Lou Williams or Will Barton in a vacuum?
Probably Will Barton, I think.
Okay.
I mean, Lou Williams was incredible last year, but Lou Williams is older, not playing a position of premium, and is like probably one of the 5 worst defenders in the league. So, Barton's not great defensively, but he's not like he's not Lou Williams level either.
Sure. And I think that's fair. I would take Lou just because he's a better offensive player, and I don't think both of them are taking stuff off the table offensively. That's just in a vacuum. I mean, we need to start factoring contracts. $8 million a year for Lou Williams compared to 12 and over for Barton with this team. It just seems like a little high, but again, I think that they're counting on over time it building into the new cap and them having a younger player under contract locked in. They kind of went we're going to create value long-term avenue that a lot of teams haven't done. You see a lot of teams signing the one-year contracts. I respect Denver for trying to play the long game here and just trying to create maybe a valuable asset. This year it's going to be tough because they have all of these contracts, but they have Paul Millsap next year and a team option, and it gets more palatable starting in 2019.
Yeah, it does. Even then 2020 is going to roll around, and like we said at the top, salary cap's going to be $116 million, and JaVale McGee just signed with the Lakers. Oh my God.
There's no way, dude. Really? Oh my God. This is an all-time podcast.
This is
just getting the best live updates.
This is just the most absurd Lakers team, like, in the history. Like, by the end of this, like, podcast, Kawhi Leonard is going to be like, no, I don't really want to go there anymore.
Yeah, that would be so lit, dude. Oh my God, I can't believe this. Elfrid Payton now to the Pelicans as well.
Oh my God. Yeah, Elfrid Payton to the Pelicans actually makes sense. And by the way, you know what I think that opens up?
Oh boy, let me hear it.
Rajon Rondo to the Lakers. It kind of does, right?
This is so incredible, dude. They literally could be the worst three-point shooting team in the modern era. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. Let's just make the Lakers like the island of misfit toys around LeBron, like even more so than what the Cavs were this year. I was very strong in my statements in the column I wrote off of LeBron, but like saying that, like, oh yeah, like the Lakers are in a much better position than Cleveland was last year. Starting to rethink that a little bit. Not really, but still. I mean, JaVale to the Lakers with Lance Stevenson. JaVale McGee, Triple B contract. Put it on the board.
It's going to be fun, man. At least it's going to be entertaining.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe.
I actually might have to go down to like LA Lakers games and cover them this year because it just sounds amazing. Let's move on to Chris Paul. Chris Paul signs a 4-year, $159.7 million contract, if I remember correctly. Good deal, bad deal? What do you think?
They had to do it. I think that's the thing is you already kind of went all in getting them. And I think they came super close last year where you can justify the high amounts of salary moving forward. Like they're paying James Harden and Chris Paul a combined $88 million in 2021. That is unreal.
While their combined age will be 70 years old.
So it's risky, of course. I mean, but that is the trade-off for Chris Paul. You're paying for the first 2 years of that deal. You're paying for a chance at a title, and you're living with maybe the latter 2 years. I mean, they could have given him a 5-year deal. At least they got the 4. But yeah, I mean, there's a very high percentage chance, and I'm like the biggest Chris Paul fan ever, but considering age, considering injury history, that this contract looks pretty damn brutal in 2020 or 2021.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good chance that this ends up being a disaster. Like, by the time 2022 rolls around, not going to end well, but this is the price you pay whenever you're an NBA championship contender. We should probably put this Chris Paul deal into the context of Trevor Ariza then signing in Phoenix. That significantly hurts their ability to contend for a title this year. The LeBron James signing, I think, hurts their ability to contend for an NBA championship next year. I'd still pick Houston over the Lakers based off of the current Lakers roster, but we don't know if that's going to be what the Lakers roster ends up looking like. But I guess that where I'm at on this is that whenever you have a chance, you even have a 5%, 10% chance to win a title, which I would say Houston does right now, you got to just do what you have to do and, get everyone on regardless of the long-term flexibility issues that you're creating.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I'm very much in support of that general idea. Yeah, the Trevor Ariza thing was kind of a bummer, man. honestly. Like I thought that Morey would be able to finagle that a little bit better. I know they already have 116 million guaranteed without Capella even on board, and they need Capella. I thought that Morey would get creative, try to get off of Ryan Anderson, get off of Nene, for example. And maybe there just wasn't enough time for them to really react. I don't know the politics as far as how it went down. Trevor agreed with the Phoenix Suns pretty quickly, but 1 year, $15 million, I mean, that's a good chunk of change for sure, but it's not absolutely earth-shattering long term. So I'm a little curious on why there wasn't a higher effort from what we can see from the outside vantage point of trying to secure Trevor, because I'm with you, man. Him and PJ Tucker, those guys, Eric Gordon, those guys are crucial parts to this. I mean, you can't replace Trevor Ariza with Gerald Green. You just can't.
Yeah, the big part of this for me is that Trevor Ariza, like throughout the entirety of this contract and throughout his past, I mean, he's been underpaid, and I think that for him, getting what he thought he was worth was incredibly valuable. Phoenix obviously ponied up and decided this is what he was worth. I think he's an incredible player. I think he's probably worth $15 million in a vacuum, but it's not something Houston can pay because Houston is so deep into the luxury tax now. It sucks for the league. The biggest winner of this contract is Golden State, like unquestionably. Yep. I mean, they're going to derive more value from Houston taking a step back than Phoenix is from having Trevor Ariza on their team. I mean, it's a bummer for the league. I agree with you, and it's a bummer for what we hope is competition for the Warriors. Hopefully LeBron kind of picks that up.
Yeah, and I'm still not willing to write this team off.
You're right.
I give Morey a ton of wiggle room as far as him still having something up his sleeve. I still think that's possible. But yeah, I mean, it definitely looks like a blow to their current contending status because Ariza was so important. Like, there's people that are talking like he's like replaceable on this team. I don't think that's the case.
Not with what they have at their disposal in terms of assets and tools.
Exactly right. And I think like a guy like D'Anthony Melton can come in and help them, like Vince Edwards, but those guys are rookies, man. They're not going to come in and have an impactful like presence on the floor like Trevor did. What did you think about the deal from the Suns angle? Because they were getting killed about this too. Like a lot of guys were up in arms about paying Trevor Ariza $15 million a year. What did you think about that?
I think that it is a smart deal from Phoenix's perspective. Well, it's hard to say it's smart because there is a pretty significant opportunity cost to all of this, right? If you're Phoenix, you have cap space in a summer where very few teams have cap space. You can go out and you can probably acquire a very real asset to build with your core around, right? Was there that asset on the market though? Like their biggest position of need is point guard. Can you sign Marcus Smart whenever you have Josh Jackson and like he is the third biggest piece of your rebuild? Does that make sense to sign him to 4 years and 55-60 million, whatever it takes to get Boston to not match it? Dante Exum, same deal. We don't know if Dante Exum can shoot yet. Does it make sense to pay him big money that Utah isn't going to match? The one that made sense to me was Fred VanVleet, but are you going to break the bank for Fred VanVleet to try and get him to, be your starting point guard and have Toronto not match that? So I'm just not sure who the guy was that fit with their timeline,
Yeah, I think from a pure value standpoint, I would have probably, in a vacuum, me personally, taken on a contract and then taken an extra pick, or maybe gone after Aaron Gordon, who I think would be an interesting fit at the 4 next to DeAndre Ayton. But if you're putting yourself in the shoes of the Phoenix Suns, who have all of these young players, they've already invested a ton in these picks. They're trying to move forward and actually put these guys in position to succeed. That's why I like the deal with Ariza, because I will never condemn a deal that's 1 year, for example, and it helps the rest of their young guys. Like, put them at the 4 in these wing lineups with Josh Jackson, with Mikal Bridges. Booker's going to have to initiate a lot of their offense this year. We're going to see how that progresses. They need to try him at point guard to see how much he's capable there. But that makes sense to me, at least conceptually. When you look at that team now, they have an identity, and they can build around that, and it's going to help their young players and cultivate them, and they need veteran leadership. Like, that's something they don't have on their roster.
Yeah, no, that's the big thing that I think makes sense. Like, they have Jared Dudley, and they have, Tyson Chandler, but Tyson Chandler has gotten mixed reviews in that regard throughout the course of his career. Jared Dudley's a great dude, but, how many great teams has he played on? I think is a fair question, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's like your consummate role player. I think certain guys, they look up to people more that are more impact players. I love Jared Dudley as a rotation guy, but there's a ceiling maybe on how much young guys respect somebody who isn't like more of an impact starter, if that makes sense.
Right, and in Trevor Ariza, you're getting a guy who's played on winners for the last decade, basically, from the Washington years to these Houston years, last year particularly. He fits them building a very versatile defensive team. He's going to really help them space the floor around DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker. I would like to see them go out and trade for a point guard. I think that would really help them and have them be much improved this year. But, it's a fine deal. It's not going to be something that significantly impacts their long-term future, I don't think either. And the other part of this is that I think he's going to be a really good trade asset in February. There are going to be so many teams that want him.
Yeah, could definitely be. That's another element to this. It makes sense to me, right? And when you're looking at these teams that need to improve, make moves that actually put your young players in positions to succeed.
Yeah, no, I think that's almost the biggest key of building a young roster. You saw it with the 76ers. They signed dudes like Elton Brand and got shit for it for some reason that I never really understood. Sometimes you just need guys who are able to provide just leadership and provide something that you're not getting from your young players.
100% right. And I think that, again, the Suns are looking for character guys. You see Mikal Bridges, the trade there. I think that factors into the calculus as well.
DeAndre Jordan goes to Dallas on a 1-year, $24 million deal. I like part of this deal. I don't like another part of it. What are your thoughts overall?
It's kind of similar, honestly, to Trevor Ariza in certain respects. It puts their guys in better position to succeed, giving Dennis Smith a kind of rim runner like that, who's a lob threat. That's something that Carlisle's talked about. DeAndre is one of the best in the league there. But again, I think that Dallas, it's opportunity cost related to me. What were better available options? Again, that's an Aaron Gordon destination. He'd be kind of an awesome combo forward fit next to Luka Doncic. So I just felt like there were better options available, maybe even taking on a contract, an expiring deal, and getting an extra first-round pick because they gave up theirs in all likelihood next year in the Hawks deal. But I get the team fit. It's just I think there were better options available. Yeah,
so Aaron Gordon gets 4 years, $82 million from Dallas. Or not from Dallas, from Orlando. If Dallas offers him 4 years, 94 or something, that's right around the 24 they're giving to DeAndre. It cuts into their salary cap situation for next summer, but you're getting a legit difference maker, I think, and that's something that is valuable.
And you're also aligning that guy with your core, and I think that's even more important, is not having a divided core. DeAndre Jordan is 30. I know Dallas wants to make the playoffs, and a lot of these teams are feeling the pressure to make the playoffs, but you have to look long-term, and you're trying to build an established chemistry with your two primary pieces, and this doesn't really accomplish that. But again, it's hard to really break the deal when it's a 1-year contract that makes sense on the roster as far as giving guys better outlets to succeed.
So, yeah, and it kind of goes back to the Phoenix thing as well. Having DeAndre Jordan on your roster helps the development of Dennis Smith and Luka Doncic. It just does. He's so good in pick and roll situations. He's such a good screen setter. He's such a good communicator defensively. He's going to teach these guys exactly how to run these scenarios and how to rotate defensively and everything. I just really think that, for instance, you go out and you offer Julius Randle 4 years, $50 million. You go out and you try and, would you rather have Derek Favors on a 2-year, $36 million deal or DeAndre Jordan on 124?
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I think for Favors, it would have to be a little less than that because you're creating maybe some extra surplus value with the contract. But I do think that, Favors might be safer. But again, it's DeAndre's 1 year. That's the thing. He's 30. Favors is somehow still 26, which I have no idea how that's possible that he's still 26 years old for some reason. But maybe that was the more safer play. He can do more as a short roll guy, but I think they really just wanted a lob threat for Dennis. I think that's the main thing. If you hear Carlisle talk about it, Randall's not really that. He's more of a short roll guy. He's not a pick and pop guy. I think they just wanted somebody who can really fit into that spread pick and roll offense.
Yeah. The big thing with DeAndre is how is his defense going to age, I guess, because he was sneaky not good defensively this year. 63.4% against him at the rim from opponents, 31 out of 36th among players who had, I want to say, like 300 shots against them. I believe that his block rate fell to 2.4%, which is minuscule. He's starting to show the cracks defensively, and you could maybe blame it on playing with Milos Teodosic and Lou Williams, or you could say, hey, he's getting worse defensively. I don't really know what the answer is there.
Yeah, I think that Dallas is cognizant of that. I mean, if this was normal circumstances, maybe if he was 30 years old, but like 2 years ago, maybe Dallas gives him a 2 to 3 year deal. But now in this current cap environment, combined with his age, they're probably pretty cognizant of the fact that his defense, if his defense falls off and his athleticism deteriorates at all, then he's not skilled enough to compensate for that.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely right. Let's move on to a couple of the more questionable deals to me. Ersan Ilyasova gets 3 years, $21 million from Milwaukee. That third year is non-guaranteed. This one shocked me. It was reported before midnight on July 1st. I don't get why Ersan was a priority for Milwaukee.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, it wasn't to the same extent as the Timothy Mozgov deal with the Lakers, because that was just ludicrous as far as 4 years, 64, and that shocked the living hell out of me. This was definitely surprising, though. I don't know why.
This is nowhere near that.
Oh, of course not. But I'm just saying, like, as far as this kind of maybe the current cap environment and putting in context of that, I was just very curious about why their resources were going here first and foremost.
So here's my pitch on it, I guess, is what I would say. They really need a floor spacing 5, I think. They were hoping, I think, that it would be Thon Maker, but he has not proven himself to be ready yet. Ersan Ilyasova has worked with Mike Budenholzer in Atlanta. He has a good reputation around the league. He is a very, very good shooter from distance. He's one of the few big guys that you could like run off of screens, and he'll be able to shoot off of legitimate movement. For a team that needs floor spacing and needed a different dynamic at center, I get it. But there's a reason that he was on a 1 year, $6 million contract last summer. And it's because he is a mess defensively. He can't move his feet anymore. He is not a rim protector at all. You know, maybe you can hide him a little bit with Giannis, but he's still going to get picked apart in matchups.
Yeah, absolutely there. And he's not a dynamic defensive rebounder either. He's pretty good on the offensive glass. I thought that he did pretty well there in Philadelphia as far as being
throughout
advantageous.
his career, yeah. It's always been a calling card.
So, yeah, he's good there, but like Milwaukee's always struggled on the defensive glass. He doesn't really give them that. He's definitely more of a situational big, though. I get certain elements of this. We can talk about allegedly hard capping themselves because it pretty much has to be that. So what do you think? What are your thoughts there?
So they do hard cap themselves. Like, I mean, it's not allegedly. Like, Steel hard caps them at 129.8. So I don't like the fact that they are hard capped. The reason for that is that I am higher on Jabari Parker than what I think most people are. And it essentially, especially if they go through with signing Brandon Jennings to $2.2 million, although they have decided to move that date out to August 1st, it essentially puts them in a situation where they can only match up to like $17 million on Jabari, like something in that range, $18 million, before they go over the hard cap. And the hard cap is not a situation where the thing is just like an end of the year circumstance, like it is with the luxury tax, where you have all year to get under it if you need to. The hard cap is a hard cap throughout the entirety of the season. And this does limit them if Jabari was to get a very real offer tomorrow.
Yeah, and again, we talked about this off-air via text. My theory is just kind of a box-in negotiating strategy with Jabari and a mechanism to save face. I don't think that could be completely wrong. Maybe they're not even interested in retaining Jabari's services at anything above, minimal value, like maybe 12 to 13 million. For me, it just kind of seemed that way with how they proceeded, hard capping themselves from the off. I think they probably could have gotten Ersan for maybe just the taxpayer MO level, so they wouldn't have actually incurred that hard cap. It just kind of seemed like that was where they were negotiating from. It's like, okay, well, we can't really pay you any more than this. It's kind of a take it or leave it stance. And that just makes me think that, A, that was either their strategy, or B, they just don't value Jabari that highly.
I think it's the latter, to be honest. I think that they value him, and I think they'd be happy to have him back, but they're going to let him go get an offer. And if that offer happens to be more than, $18 million, they're going to be like, okay, I get it. We're just not going to match that. It's tough for me because I think Jabari is a very, very talented player. Jabari Parker still has put up, it's probably not the best season of any 2014 draftee, but that 2016-17 season where he put up 20 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists on I'm looking at the number right now, 56.3 true shooting percentage while posting a 19 BER. That's still one of the best seasons that any 2014 draftee has had, even though it came in 55 games.
Yeah, and it's obviously a different situation with Jabari than it is for someone like Wiggins because of the injury concerns. I just think it's kind of fascinating to see how these two franchises, the Bucks and the Timberwolves, kind of dealt with high pedigree picks, being the 1 and 2 overall selections. Minnesota was always going to max Wiggins out because he was good enough to be a promising prospect, but not great enough to where it was like an Embiid situation, where he looked like a legitimate star, right? And I think that how the Bucks are proceeding, it's hard to read too much into because, again, it could be mostly injury-driven. Maybe they don't believe in his long-term ability to hold up under a larger sample. But it's kind of curious to me that they aren't putting maybe a greater effort into retaining him.
Yeah, if I was them, I would, we talked about Kevin Love on the last podcast making sense for them potentially as like a stretch 5. He can be that guy, is like a stretch combo 4-5 who can be valuable for them, in my opinion. I would be signing him to whatever it took. And maybe I would let him go get an offer and let him see what's out there. If he would come back with a $15-16 million a year offer, I would match that in a heartbeat and not think twice. You are more skeptical on that, correct? What is your number that you would not match?
It's very interesting. I think mine's more like 14-15 million, but for me, it's more about the length of the contract. So
would you sign 460?
I don't think I'd go 4. I think I'd go maybe 3. That would be the utmost there, because I still think you could create some surplus value at 14-15 if he does hit. It's a very interesting situation. Where would you what team really stands out to you as a team that should really roll the dice on Jabari?
That has cap space this summer?
Yeah.
It's hard for me to trust the Bulls training staff right now. Not going to lie to you.
Yep.
That would make sense, but I just don't think that they should go down that route given their history. Dallas, I think, would have made a ton of sense to me. I would have tried to go after him. To me, he is darn close to what Aaron Gordon is. If not, Aaron Gordon is a more safe asset, I guess, because he hasn't had the injury history. But Aaron Gordon is kind of an overrated defender. He's not this incredible versatile weapon that people thought he would be coming out of college. He could still get there, but he's not there yet. He's probably something league average to slightly below league average right now. Jabari is worse than that, but I think Jabari is just a better offensive player than what Aaron Gordon is. And obviously he has the injury history that throws it all to hell. Indiana, if I was Indiana, I would have,
that's what I was going to say,
100% gone pretty hard after him, because if he, worst case scenario and, Milwaukee matches, then you've put Milwaukee in a tough spot if he ends up failing.
Indiana made a lot of sense because they've kind of gone the middle ground way as far as they got Oladipo. They're trying to kind of win now, but also they have some young prospects on their team. They're not going to bottom out. You got to take shots on guys with higher upside. I agree that Jabari's offensive upside is, I'm not sure if it's considerable, but it's pretty damn good. I think if everything goes right for him and he really materializes as a shooter, he's got offensive abilities that few other guys have as far as explosiveness, if all that's there. So Indiana stood up for me.
Jabari averaged 26-3 at age 21. Like his offensive upside is fairly 25 points a game, right?
I mean, in the right team, sure. I think he can get you 25.
And like an efficient one too. Like, or at least like league average 25.
Yeah, I think league average 25 would be a reasonable kind of high-end median to upside outcome for him.
Right. Like, I'm not saying that like that's who he's going to be, but I think that if we're talking high-end upside, like that's what it is. And 25 points a game on 56% true shooting percentage. It's one of the 12 best scorers in the NBA.
Certainly possible. I mean, his knocks are not offensively for the most part. They're more, is he going to be too much of a defensive liability, especially in the playoffs? But we've seen him defend instance last playoffs against the Celtics. He had good moments, but they were more few and far between if you look over the course of his career than they were the norm for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you on that. Not a good defender yet, but he at least showed energy and activity in the playoff series against Boston. Not quite there yet in terms of awareness, though. I'm going to be fascinated to see what contract he signs because I don't really have a gauge on how this ends up going. We mentioned Jabari as a 4-man to Indiana. Doug McDermott ends up signing a 3-year, $22 million deal to Indiana. I mean, that's a hefty deal for Doug McDermott.
It's another one of those things where that's your initial intent. I'm pretty skeptical of. Like, I thought they should have gone after Aaron Gordon pretty damn hard. I thought that was the logical destination for him, or at least another one. That's been kind of a general theme along this podcast. But
I mean, for what it's worth, like, I would bet that they did and found that it was not going to happen.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think that just stylistically, when you guaranteed Bogdanovich's contract, and then you bring in McDermott, who's definitely probably more of a bench player. It just kind of seemed like they could have satisfied other needs, but another team that was trying to potentially maybe create a longer-term asset that looks better in future cap years. I'm not sure if that's going to be the reality.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think this is a tradable contract, right? Like, I don't think that they're going to have a problem getting off of it if they have to get off of it. They were also a team that did not shoot threes last year. Like, they took... I think fewer threes than all but 4 teams in the NBA. Doug McDermott really, really helps there. He will be able to space the floor for Victor Oladipo. He will be able to knock down shots. That has value. Yeah. And he gives them security next summer with Thaddeus Young and Bojan Bogdanovic coming off the books.
Sure. And I think, again, I might have just preferred other guys that are available. Yeah. Like, I like Joe Harris a little bit better as a player, and I would have just pursued that avenue. But we don't know intel-wise who was actually amenable to going to Indiana. It was just kind of a curious initial emphasis for the Pacers to go this direction. Yeah,
so like my theory on it all is like Anthony Tolliver is probably like a room exception guy this year, right? Like something like $4.5 million, maybe $3.5 million. Like Anthony Tolliver, the difference between him and Ersan Ilyasova, probably not super high. The difference between him and Doug McDermott, probably not super high, right?
Yeah, and again, I just think they got to take more shots on upside guys with the situation they're in, and McDermott doesn't really have any upside. He's someone that can help your system as far as shooting ability, but I don't really see him improving at any kind of rate that would equate to him being an impactful starter on a good team.
My 2 favorite deals so far that have been struck are Ed Davis and Joe Harris, both to the Brooklyn Nets. Ed Davis for $4.4 million is a bargain. It is just such a great deal. He has been one of the best bench bigs in the league now for 3 years, and like he's just a very, very competent big man who is an incredible teammate too. Like, there's a reason Damian Lillard like campaigned to keep him throughout the latter half of this year.
Absolutely. And I think that just the cap work here, I don't know the name of the woman who does the Nets cap work. She's a former judge, I think, and it's always good. Like, she did the front loading with Otto Porter's contract. Here we have Joe Harris under the early qualifying rights, so he has his lower cap hold for about 1.5 that stays on the books. And then we have Ed Davis under the room exception, so that applies after the Nets use their cap space, which is they can create a maximum of about 15.9, so about $16 million they can still utilize. and they're both good value players. I think that they can actually, like, Joe Harris helps them. He fits in their scheme, can shoot off movement. One of the best shooters in the league last year as far as off movement goes, combined with dribble pull-ups, not maybe at the volume that some of these other guys, but they can even flip him at the deadline because he has an extra year on his deal because he had to sign the early qualifying right offer. So that's like creating an asset that is both tradable and is valuable. And is valuable to your own team.
I have a great Joe Harris stat.
Sweetness.
Of the guards to average 10 points a game last year, Joe Harris and his 63.4 true shooting percentage was tops in the NBA.
There you go.
He's like really good offensively now, and he's not a disaster defensively. Like he is much better than Doug McDermott, in my opinion.
I agree, and I think Joe Harris, he at least has positional size, right, to play the wing spot. 6'6", solid guard size, and for $6 million, I'm completely game with that contract. Again, he helps your own team. He can potentially be an asset in a trade. I don't think you can do it any better than that while preserving your cap space.
And then can we talk real quick about what the fuck Portland is doing? Because
I'm not going to have any answers for you.
Yeah, I'm very unclear. To not match Ed Davis at $4.4 million does not make any sense to me. To not hand a qualifying offer to Shabazz Napier after he was actually like a competent backup point guard, and look, like I didn't think Shabazz was a top 50 prospect in his draft class. Like I've never been high on Shabazz Napier throughout his career. He was really actually good this year, and they didn't offer him a qualifying offer. They don't offer Pat Connaughton a qualifying offer. Like they don't have anyone on the bench now that is like established in any way, and it comes in direct contrast to what Neil Olshey said after the draft, where like, you know, he's like, what do you think rookies that are drafted 24th and 37th are just going to step in and be able to create an impact immediately? Well, you're now down to a situation where Anthony Simons and Gary Trent currently might have to make an impact for your team, and that's not a great spot to be in based off of your process that you're undertaking.
I haven't understood anything they've done for a while, but especially like the draft and then this, for what you noted, basically, I agree 100% with that. And I mean, Connaughton he was pretty good for them, filling the role with Nick Stauskas, who has not been effective. It's like, okay, I get it for the minimum. You take a shot on Stauskas, maybe you can, reverberate his career, but losing Ed Davis, losing the depth and not being able to fill that role, like what they needed was more of like a wing type. Like take Jacob Evans in the draft, man. Don't take another like backup point guard or combo guard, scoring guard who can't really play next to Dame and CJ. Like that doesn't make any sense to me.
Is Pat Connaughton like getting more than the minimum from anyone?
I wouldn't think so in this market. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting as an overarching team to see how much the market gets squeezed as we progress along here.
Yeah. I just don't understand what they're going for. Like, I don't understand what their process is at all. Aaron Baines signed what basically his max non-bird rights deal was, right?
Yep.
I think it's 5 years, 11, or not 5 years. Good Lord. 2 years, 11 million, so like 5.5 a year. I think it's 5.3 and 5.7, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. Sharpshooting Aaron Baines, man.
I'm all in on Aaron Baines. He was really good this year. Like he was legitimately super valuable.
Oh yeah, it's a good deal for Boston. I mean, he wanted to be there. Keith Smith had that one tweet. I don't know if it was actually real or not, or if he was just kind of making it up. But it just seemed like a very Aaron Bainesian thing to do. Like, oh, you want to help Celtics? Sure, I'll take a couple million less. Done. That was the negotiation.
Yeah, no joke. Would not surprise me if that's how it went down. I guess that we should talk about Gerald Green. I think that's one of the value signings of the summer so far. Gerald Green for a $1.5 million cap hit, $2.4 million in actual contract value.
I mean, he played a pivotal role for those guys off the bench in the playoffs. He's a guy who's a streak shooter. He can get hot. You kind of need that firepower, and he's going to be able to play, the wing spot throughout the regular season. So getting a guy like that for a team that's in the tax is a good buy. Yeah.
Fred VanVleet. We should talk about Fred VanVleet. 2 years, $18 million. VanVleet's really good at basketball, and I like this deal a lot. It pushes them further into the tax. They have to find a way to get off of Norman Powell's contract. but I like it. I think it makes sense.
I don't hate it. I like the player. I like the fit as far as backup point guard. I don't think $9 million for a high level backup with his early qualifying rights is a bad deal. It gets him to the unrestricted market in 2 years, so he's kind of betting on himself a little bit. Like the player, all the talk about the Suns, for example, maybe giving him this huge arenas provision contract that would just be incredibly large in the latter years. I was a little dubious on that. Do I want to pay this guy for 4 years? Let's calm the jets a little bit, but this is a fine deal.
Well, like the thing about that is too that you can even out the cap hit over 4 years now, so it's not as bad. And you can even out the salary payment as well, can't you?
Yes, I believe you can. It's just for me, it was more just the general contract amount overall. Yeah. If you're going to dissuade Toronto from matching, you're going to have to make it
like $12 million a year, probably, like to not
probably
match
at
it,
least.
Right?
Yeah, I would think. I don't know. Who knows with Masai if he would have just walked away or not? But yeah, I would think it has to be at least $12 million.
Yeah, and that's probably too much. Glenn Robinson from Indiana to Detroit. That's a 2-year, $8 million deal with like a team option in year 2. I think it's a smart deal. Good deal for Detroit.
They need wing shooters. Taking a dice roll on someone like this, the fits around their 2 big guys makes some sense. Stanley Johnson hasn't really panned out yet. Kennard was more impressive last year than maybe a lot of people gave him credit for. But yeah, just take shots and like high percentage shots on wing shooters. Reggie Bullock, I believe they're still under contract. He's a non-guarantee for $2.5 million. Is that correct?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I just forgot if he was actually still under contract, but I'm guessing that he is, just to flood those guys with a bunch of potential shooters that can really space the floor.
Last couple of guys here, Marco Bellinelli and Rudy Gay. The Spurs are certainly not acting like a rebuilding team.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't really know how all of these guys are going to get minutes. They still have Derek White, who I'm really high on. Lonnie Walker, apparently, I mean, he should get some rotation minutes, maybe not from the off or whatnot. They're pretty crowded in the backcourt. Patty Mills, DeJounte Murray. Rudy Gay's fine. 1 year, $10 million. I'm fine. I mean, he's good on the Spurs. He was pretty effective last year, honestly, overall. But I mean, the deals don't really scream out to you in like a positive way.
Yeah, I mean, they badly need shooting, like just in the worst way.
Sure.
So I get the idea of Marco Bellinelli. I probably would not have wanted to go more than 1 year, but whatever. Sure.
Yep.
I think that's about all we need to talk about. I think we've hit everything, right?
Got a couple more really quick. Derrick Rose for the minimum returning to the Timberwolves. What are your thoughts there?
I'm sad for Tyus Jones.
Those are my thoughts as well. A lot of people hit me up yesterday and said that Tyus is going to play the point guard. Derrick Rose is going to play the shooting guard. I get that. I'm not saying he's not going to get any minutes at all, even though Derrick Rose did play over Tyus in the playoffs last year predominantly. But why would you want a shooting guard that can't shoot? Like, you got to, again, talk about putting these guys in positions to succeed. I'm a big Tyus fan. I'm not as huge on him as some people are, but I do think he's an effective NBA player. It's just kind of a bummer to see that situation play out this way.
Tyus Jones, sneaky, might be their best point guard, I think.
Oh, I'm sneaky on that bandwagon.
Yeah. And he will, like, I don't know if he will play a ton because it just depends on who they sign at the 2, right? Like, do they end up trying to get Luol Deng and like play him on the wing or something? I mean,
oh my God,
this is Tom Thibodeau.
Make it stop. Make it stop.
We don't know what he's going to do. What are the other ones you got?
Luke Cornett with the Knicks. There was some disconnect.
Sure.
I think if that was a minimum or a $1.6 million deal, whatever. I mean, a big who can shoot.
Sure.
I think that's honestly.
Derek Jones got signed too.
Yes. Yes.
Sure. Yeah. Salah Mejri signed. Sure.
There you go. Yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, I can't bring too much excitement there. Cole, tell the people where they can find your work.
As usual, on thestepien.com, I will have some Summer League content out coming up after the kind of draft hiatus after that whole ordeal. I'm going to be in Vegas for a week, so I'll be at games and kind of live tweeting there. I'm not sure when the next time I'll write an article is, but definitely sometime after Summer League, going over some of the prospects. And yeah, it's fun. Summer League's awesome. I love watching all the young guys. That's probably my favorite part about the whole draft process, is getting to see these guys right away in person. Yeah, I'm excited for Summer League. I get in on Friday. It's a beautiful, beautiful event. Definitely. Cole,
This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Android, wherever you listen to podcasts, Pocket Casts, anything like that. We'll be back later this week with more on free agency. But until next time, we will talk soon. Bye.